Network Automation Nerds podcast. Hello, and welcome to Network Automation Nerds podcast, a podcast about network automation, network engineering, Python, and a whole lot of technology topics. I'm your host, Eric Cho. Today on the show, we'll be talking to my friend Rick Donato, founder of Packt Coders. Packt Coders is a place where people could learn network automation through code, labs, and community. As you can tell, network automation is in Rick's blood. So we both share a passion for network automation, except he does it a lot cooler. Today, I'd like to talk to Rick about his personal journey, network automation technologies, founding of Packt Coders, and everything in between. So let's dive right in. Hello, Rick. Welcome to the show.
Hey there. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So, Rick, before we talk about, Packt Coders, which is what I'm really interested in, I've seen, so I've been following your work for a while, and I've seen how, Packt Coders have grown. But before we dive into that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get into technology and network automation?
Yeah. I've been working in the IT industry for quite a few years. Started off doing a bit of Windows support, but kind of had a love for networking, and
Right.
and really like I moved into a networking role. And some folks might already know this story, but I landed my first kind of pure kind of support networking role, and it was just kind of on the phones. It was all good. And then I got called into the office, and my boss said, "Hey, look, your phone stats are terrible. You're not crunching as many tickets as you should be." At that time, the job was like kind of checking like thousands of switch ports, right? Someone would phone up and
Right.
say, "My web service not working."
Right.
And you're like, "Oh, there might be a half duplex problem. It's somewhere in the data center." so,
Or
um,
framing or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I thought, hang on, it's a good chance. I've been wanting to learn. I've been dabbling around with Python
Right.
shell scripts. So I
Right.
thought it was a good chance to kind of get into Python. So every morning I thought I'd try to build this tool. And so I spent 6 months every morning. I kind of built this tool, and I finally built this tool which would go out and SNMP thousands of ports and just tell you the issues. And it done
Oh,
great.
wow.
It worked. My phone stats improved. My boss was happy. Then they rolled it out to the rest of the company, and it was really good. And the mantra was like every morning or every just kind of pick away at it in small bits, because before you know it, 2-3 years has gone down the road, and you've learned a good amount. So that's how I kind of got into network automation.
So that was with a shell script. So you had a shell script. Wasn't even Python. It was a shell script that goes out and query the devices and get the stats.
So that was a Python. So that was like the
Oh, that
first
was a
ever
Python.
Python tool that I wrote. The code was absolutely terrible. um, but yeah, so it just went out, and but it's cool, right? When you're starting out, it's all good.
Yeah.
And the thing is that it just went out, and it got a lot of information back, which is the thing with networking, right? We've got a whole
Yeah.
load of information. It's really kind of how we display it, and it
Right.
displayed it in a table-based view, and it highlighted those issues. It highlighted duplex issues, VLAN, mismatches, and we could kind of pinpoint issues really, really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked. It worked well. So, and then kind of from there, I got the buzz of
Yeah.
network automation.
So that's kind of interesting, right? Because I think one of the most common question that I get asked and I hear people asking all the time in various platforms was, how do you get started in technology? How do you get started in your first IT role, right? So we both did started out in a support role. So that was like a tier one support. I remember for me, I was in college, and what I had to do was get up at 5:30 in the morning. I'll be the first guy who, back then there was no 24/7 support. The earliest time was like 6 a.m. So I had to get up, drive my way in, and then open up the door, turn on the light, make coffee, and then start answering phone calls. So I think from what you said, that was how you get started. So that was a very valid way of breaking in. Just do a support role, which is something that probably either the interns or the junior years get started on. But that's a very valid role. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you got a good point. I think that it all comes down to kind of having something to work
To
against, right?
land? Yeah,
So sometimes when you're in a role, it's quite easy because you're kind of given those challenges, those things you want to automate against. But I think it's really good
right,
to kind of push yourself, especially when
right,
you're learning new technologies. So, for example, just giving yourself like mini projects. So like, a few years ago, I wanted to learn Django, and I was always forgetting birthdays. Right, I was always forgetting my mother-in-law's birthday. So I thought it's a great opportunity to kind of build a
that's not a
birthday
good thing.
reminder tool, you know,
Yeah,
and it helped me learn Django, and and obviously as you go through that, there's going to be things that don't work, it might break or whatever, and you kind of just kind of taking that mentality of just kind of giving yourself these small projects to kind of keep learning. I think it's really important.
that's a good point. So in a support role or in any kind of role in IT, you always encounter people's problem, right? And your own problem as well, like you mentioned. So you started out, and I did the same thing too. When I actually went back to a support role as well. So a number of years later, I started working for Juniper and in a JTAC role. So back again, I was at support role, except this time it wasn't like entry level; it was tier 3. So then start seeing people's problem as well, and that was kind of my first encounter on large scale networks. But you know how automation could help that large scale network to manage and so on. So as you said, you were looking for problems, and you were trying to solve your own problem, and at the same time you leverage those opportunities to learn new technology like Django. And I hope your mother-in-law is happy that her birthday has always been remembered now.
Yeah, yeah, mega happy. Yeah, yeah, and my wife is as well.
There you go. There you go. Kill two birds with yeah. And okay, cool. So let's go back to what you were saying before. So you were in a support role, and the voice. I guess you were using voice over IP. So the voice quality was horrible, and you trace it back to kind of networking issue. And so you wrote this Python script that goes out and detect those problem, fix them, so your medium quality score goes back to the normal range and so on. But that wasn't the whole story, right? So once you started get the bug, there's still be a time between getting bunch of SNMP stat to founding Packet Coders. So what happened in between?
Yeah, so after working there, kind of enjoyed that. That was all good, and then I'd been blogging, so I've been blogging for a couple of years at that point. Started
Right.
out blogging when I was doing my CCNA,
Mm-hmm.
and as times went on, and I was doing the same thing with blogging, right, as I was with the kind of the projects that I spoke to you about. I kept giving myself these questions to
Right.
answer, and then kind of kept
Right.
blogging about them, and it just kind of evolved and evolved, and these blogs got longer and longer, and they kind of started turning into guides, and it was great. It was helping folks while I was working at the time. It was helping a lot of them to kind of help with their jobs, and it was all good. I was learning, other people was learning, and so yeah, it kind of just evolved all with the blogging, the learning, the automation, um, up until a point where I done some more automation in that company, and it kind of got bigger and bigger and bigger, and done bigger and bigger projects,
Right.
and done more and more things, and automated more things, and that was all good. And then thought, right, took a couple of years out and worked in the NFV and SDN space.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like personally, with the SDN and NFV space, I was hoping it was going to be all open source. It was going to be all. I was hoping that it was going to be the way that the network automation ecosystem is now.
Right.
Um, you know, I, we had the open daylight and stuff, but
Yep.
things didn't really work out like that. You had all the vendors, and a lot of the vendors were doing, they had their own tools. You had NSX, you had Contrail and stuff, and so
Right.
the open source thing was okay, but it didn't really flourish the way I thought it was. The
Mm-hmm.
ONOS and the open daylight and stuff.
Yeah.
So at that point, I thought, my heart, and there was a lot of decent open source tools coming out in, there was Nornir, Batfish, a lot of good tools coming out in the automation space. So I thought, you know, let's
Right.
get back into the automation, and then went and done consultancy for a year. That was all good. Learned a lot with some amazing folks at Network to Code. Super smart guys, really are. And yeah, from there I thought, you know, hang on, I'm writing these massive guides. I enjoy training.
Right.
It kind of, it's a no-brainer. Let's just let's see if I can spin up a platform to help folks. And also at this time, it's really, I think it's really hard for people to learn network automation, right?
Right. Right.
The poor folks out there, they've learned networking, which is hard enough. Now it's like, hang on, you've got to learn, do a bit of automation to make it even quicker.
Right.
And then on top of that, well, hang on, we might want to learn Kubernetes as well. And then there's more tools coming out. And I think, you know, I think it is challenging for people. You know, they've only got so many hours in the day to learn this stuff. And, you know, businesses are demanding more and more skills. So, yeah, I just wanted to kind of come in and help folks with that learning journey, really.
Got it. So, I think that kind of all ties in together, right? Because you were doing things that were your company specific. So, you know, you were very focused on your internal tools. You're doing bigger and bigger automation project. I'm sure, you know, by the time you're handling, you know, company-wide projects, no longer just SNMP, it's probably CI/CD, it's probably a lot of these other technologies. And then you went into consulting, which was a great way to also, you know, for people who, you know, kind of, I think part of the reason I started this podcast is I just kind of look at people's journey, and it may not be, you know, like an exact fit for you, but looking at their journey, you know, you could kind of gauge, you know, kind of how their trajectory was and how their decision making process. So it kind of ties in that you went into consulting, which was helping people, which was engaging a lot of different customers and situations, that you were able to see the common threads of problems. And as you mentioned, you know, network automation is kind of hard. And you know, I was really into the open flow, you know, scene, and also the players, and as you mentioned, open daylight, but it was pretty fragmented. And you know, there was kind of friction between vendors and different projects even, and just, you know, kind of competing interests. And so, and you ended up just saying, hey, network automation is hard, and let's, you know, by the time you start this, you were writing, you know, I don't know, part 1 of 10 on blogs, right? So that became a white paper.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and yeah, here I am today with Packt Coders. Yeah.
Cool. So you started Packt Coders. So when I mean, it's probably a, you know, evolution process, right? So when did you start Packt Coders, and what are some of the kind of stages that you went to before this became, you know, like a thing that you're trying to build, you know, bring bread in, I guess.
Yeah. So, well, before, I mean, there was originally Packet Flow, and
Okay.
Packet Flow was a blog that I'd had out for a couple of years, and it's more general kind of networking.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the time, I think it was around March, April this year, I decided to kind of do a rebrand, and that was at the point that to move it into and change it to Packt Coders.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so there's, you know, there's still a lot of old, you know, kind of general networking blogs and stuff on the platform if people want to see that. But yeah, so, and really, you know, the key thing with Packt Coders is that, for me, I feel like there's a number of different ways to learn. There's, you know, getting hands-on. So we kind of provide some labs for you, because you don't want the hassle of having to spin up GNS3 or Eve, buying compute, etc. And then also, you know, we provide all the code samples and the repos, because sometimes, you know, you might have read a course, but you just need a quick reference, or you don't actually want to type out all of that script. So provide those code repos. And then also on top of that, then a community. So if you need help, if there's a script that you're struggling with, or something's not working in one of the courses, or you've just got some general questions, then provide you with that community support, as well as, you know, there's meetups, guest speaker sessions, 101 demo, 101 like sessions. Like for example, last month we did a 101 on Prometheus and Grafana for folks
Mhm.
that had never used it, and that's really cool. You know, full hands on, and that was really, really good, and played around with that and got folks to create their first PromQL queries and their first dashboards. So yeah, there's lots going on.
Nice. So I think so for people who are on YouTube, certainly you could see we're browsing around the website. Of course, for people who are on a podcast, the website, and we'll link this in the show notes. But the website URL is packetcoders.io, and you mentioned there's three, I guess, main pillars for Packet Coders. So first of all, it is a paid membership site for people to which makes sense because these are knowledge that's worth paying for, and which will kind of dive into the problem set that they're trying to solve. But there's three main pillars behind your philosophy for Packet Coders that I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong. So first one is just code, right? Like you want to show people the code, not just talking about it, but actually demonstrate, show them how it works. And then there's the labs where you, as you mentioned, not everybody has GNS3. Not everybody wants to fire up their what is it, CML nowadays, not viral, every single time. So you provide a hands-on lab for the community, for people. And then there's the community support where you have I think right now it's a Slack channel. It's active community for people to ask questions, collaborate, and then also have guest speakers on a monthly basis. So did I miss something? I mean, do you want to elaborate into any part of those?
Yeah, so that's pretty much spot on. I mean, the thing of what I would say is that we've got with the hands-on labs. So one, you don't have to build the labs, but
Right,
also the courses all reference the labs. So as you go
right,
through the courses, it's
right.
fully hands-on, and you're not just working against static files or anything. You're actually working against real devices that you can
Yeah,
play around with.
yeah,
And then on top of that, with the community, there's also different tech demos and sessions. So covering different things. So it might be diving into, might 1 month give you the latest demos of the latest Suzy Q, or some of the latest features of Batfish, or a whole ton of different things really. And there's quite a few hours now on the platform around all those different sessions that you can kind of look through when you sign up.
yeah. I think one thing I noticed on the site is really you're covering some of the technologies that are not as well covered by other platforms like Suzy, which is uh, Dust, Justin Pish, and the name is good.
Finished up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
how can I?
he's the main.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
the
He's
main
the
guy.
main. Yeah, how can I forget that?
Super clever. Super clever.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. He's the
Yeah, yeah.
co-inventor of VXLAN, right? If I remember correctly. So, and also Batfish, right? I mean, it's
Mm.
relatively new, based out of Seattle, not far from where I live, and yeah. So a lot of technologies that you cover are I don't want to call it niche, but just not as well known by people. So that's great.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of there's stuff that we want to cover, the Python stuff and all of the the data formats, but at the moment you can there's other places providing that, so really want to
Right.
kind of give people that opportunity to learn some of those new technologies.
Sure, sure. So I think you talked about this a little bit, but let's explore further on the problem set that you want to solve with Packet Coders. So what kind of problem do you want to solve? I mean, there's, as you mentioned, there are a lot of free resources out there for Python, for even for these things like Suzy. They have documentation, right? So why do people want to learn from you versus just going through open source docs?
Yeah, so I mean, really, I mean, coming through us, you can think of it as not having to read through all of the documentation and then actually kind of putting it to some real use cases. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's unfair to say that the documentation hasn't got real use cases, but obviously with the documentation you have all of the options, you have everything you can do with it, but these courses, they take you down a path, and they really are an aggregation of, the documents that I've read, books that I've read, and experience, all put into one course. So really the main thing is that rather than kind of reading books and reading these open source docs, you can do this course. And even though you might see a course and you might go, hang on, that's only an hour long or however long, that the fact that it's condensed to that point means that I'm kind of trying to save you time, to get, to cut the BS and to get to the stuff that you really need. So,
Right.
and obviously, as well as then you've got the support to help you through as you go through the courses. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I think it was I mean, I could be wrong, but many people have said this, but I remember vividly from Steve Jobs, whereas, it takes more effort to take things out than to put things in. So,
yeah,
your iPhones or your iPads, right?
Yeah, 100%. And one thing I found is, like, I've written code before where I've written code and it's like 200 lines long,
Right.
but then I've refactored it and reduced it down to the point that it's like 40 lines. And then someone will go, hang on, why have you just spent a day writing 40 lines of code? But in theory, I'm like, well, it's, that's a good thing, right? But sometimes it's, so,
for sure.
You can get courses out there. I've seen Python courses which are like uber long,
Right.
but people's time is short, and so that's the key thing that here I really want to kind of reduce the amount of time it takes for people to learn, so they can just jump on, and learn what they need.
Yeah, I think that's in general for all the content creators dilemma, right? Like, so for me, maybe with books, maybe with some courses, and with you, the same thing with guides and books and so on. It's like, it's true. So, however that book may cost, you're paying, let's just say you charge $100 an hour, you're paying $1 for that hour, you're paying $10 for that hour, but you're paying $90 for the 20 years of experience that came with that hour, right? So, I don't know. That's something that I picked up as well, but it's hard to quantify in some people's mind, and that's a difficult part. It's like you're trying to justify it in somebody else's mind, where whether you're successful or not, I don't know. But me personally, I certainly buy into that, buy into those qualifications that you've said, right? Like, you're actually spending your years of experience, you're cutting out all the unnecessary parts, and you're putting into the right context for people, as opposed to just Python. It's Python and network automation. It's not just Batfish, but how does Batfish fit into Ansible? How does Fatbat? So it's very specific and pointed solutions that you offer to people.
Yeah, 100%. It's like just been doing the like a code quality course at the moment, and like been looking through all the different options for Black, the linting, ISO, etc. And there's a ton of options, but really day to day, you're only going to need a couple of them. And then so you read, so that's cool. So you bring those to the surface, and then, well, how do you do the integrations? How do you integrate this into CI? How do you integrate this into VS Code, etc.? So yeah, it's just kind of, it's just that little bit extra, and that kind of extra bit of, that extra bit of kind of difference between the online docs.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you tell people these are your options, right? Like, if you want to have lunch, here's your Italian, your Chinese, your Japanese sushi, and all of that. However, I think based on based on our preference, and based on my experience, or talking to other people like you, I think you might want to start with Chinese. Doesn't mean you end up with that food, but that's, trust me on this one, because if it makes no difference to you, then based on those, and chances are, greater than 50%, or others, that you would end up liking it or whatnot. And you'll feel free to try on different stuff afterwards. But to start with, leverage your experience, leverage your conversation with audience, to start with something that has a higher chance of success. That seems to be like a good way to put what you said.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, no, nicely put. Always good if
Thanks.
you put things into a food analogy.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I try to find commonality as well. So we all have to eat. So food is always a popular topic for me. So
Yeah,
in the Cho family household, anyways.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So when you start, okay, so now we've covered what problems that you're trying to solve with Packet Coders, the kind of your ideology behind it, and the methods that you're delivering those contents and knowledge. So what are some of the challenges that you're facing with building Packet Coders? Is it the technology? Is it the amount of time? Is it website building? Is it money? Like what are some of the biggest challenges that you face?
Yeah, I would say that it all comes down to time,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much stuff you want to learn, right? Or
Right.
there's so much stuff that you want to write about and deliver. So yeah, there is a lot of things going on within the industry, and there's a lot of changes and a lot of new projects. So it's really just time. The amount of stuff I want to get out there and the amount of hours in the day don't
Yeah.
always seem to correlate. But yeah, so
Well, that's one of my. I guess that's one of my passion project. Is always to learn how to learn. Like you said, right? Like we all have a limited amount of time in a day, but there's so many things to learn. So one thing that we could increase that velocity is actually have a better handle on how we learn. So once we learn it, then we could pass on that knowledge. You could create your guides and blogs and courses. But how do you learn? How does does Rick Donato approach a new technology when he knows nothing about, but he needs to ramp up quickly to an expert level?
yeah, so the first thing is having like a test platform. So
Mm-hmm.
like kind of get hands on. So like just a lab. So I've got some labs, and obviously the labs that we've got are Packet Coders,
Yeah.
and really, yeah, just breaking it down into trying to find. There's a few different ways, really, but a lot of the time I kind of try to just build something,
Mm-hmm.
and then through that process of just building it, you'll
Yeah.
have to use widget X of the tool and widget Y. And then once you've got so I've kind of done this a bit with the recent PyTest course as well that we're
Right. Right.
writing,
Right.
is that kind of gone out and just built this big testing thing with PyTest using Nornir and Napalm and stuff,
Yeah.
and then just kind of then go back and then gone, right, oh, I've used this feature, I've used this feature, and then you can kind of slot them into the right areas. So it actually makes a bit more of a kind of a path to kind of explain the tool
Mm-hmm.
or the project. But yeah, it's all around just kind of, I would say, just kind of getting hands on. So for me, I use Twitter, bookmarks. I find personally tuning your Twitter stream and to different keywords and to different people, is you can get so much information out of Twitter. There's so many smart folks out there sharing things, and so many good articles and posts that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's a really good way of kind of getting information. So it's kind of like, a bit from a book. You might get some videos, you might get some online docs. So it's just kind of aggregating everything together to
Mm-hmm.
kind of to learn the best you can, really.
I see. I see. So aggregation of information. So you mentioned tech Twitter, as well as building a lab, right? So you're actually exercising your principle, the lessons you learn. You're exercising through muscle memory. Building a lab and building and solving an actual problem that solving an actual problem that you have. So during solving that problem, you encounter other technologies as well to leverage. So those are actually kind of fits right into some of these other. Like I said, this is a passion project of mine, right? Like deliberate practice and solving problem sets, being relevant, and these are kind of the learning technology. So those all make sense. Thanks for sharing those knowledge.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Yeah. So you build these lives. So I think maybe it's not a right the perfect medium to describe this, but let's just talk through a little bit about the lab portion, because I think people understand code, people understand community, but on Packet Coders, there's lab that doesn't require you to fire up your own devices, right? So can we walk through some of those lab experience, like for example, PyTest that you just built? So what would be kind of the lab experience when people buy your course and go through those?
Yeah. So I mean, so if you've got a course, you you can access the labs. So you can SSH to the devices. We give you the credentials, and then so for example, so some of the courses are slightly different in terms of how we do the labs. So something for like
Sure.
PyTest,
Hmm.
then there's different parts within the course that you pull the information back from actual devices into fixtures to be able to kind of do what you need to do.
Hmm.
So those credentials and those details are already pre-populated within the different inventory files. So you can literally just you know download the code from our repos, and then update some env files, and then you're good to go, which are all within the steps of the course. And different things require different labs, really. Something like
Sure.
batfish is really good for labbing against because it's all
Hmm.
offline. So we
Yeah.
can you can literally just give someone a whole bunch of configs
Right.
and they can just do it all local, right?
Right.
So um so yeah.
Yeah, but if it so as you mentioned, Batfish is all I guess stateless, right? You don't need to create a device for state. You
Mhm.
just kind of derive that state from your static configuration file, which is one of the selling points, that you don't have to touch your production environment, where you could
Yeah.
do your test validation through static configs that you grabbed previously. But if it were to, because that's one of the challenges, that's one of the main challenges for courses, right? Like, you need to have lab equipment. So um, are you saying that there's a bunch of lab equipment, like, was it virtual, or was it something that's sitting out there, that whatever platform you're trying to teach, like just say Ansible, that you need to create iOS devices, there's a bunch of virtual iOS devices or virtual EOS
Mm.
devices out there for you to query against. Is that true?
Yeah, we've got a spine and leaf lab.
Sure.
It's multi-vendor. Got Nexus, got Cisco Juniper devices, Aristas,
Hmm.
and yeah, you can query them. They restore the configs regularly restored, and so yeah, you can just do what you need to them. So, like for example, for the Scraply course, there's a
Yep.
part in there where you start dealing with netconf. So you can query out to the Arista devices, do netconf operations. So, and you're welcome to, like, if you want to kind of change or just try something different and just play around while you're doing the course,
Yeah.
then you can do, because they're real devices, right?
Yeah.
So,
Oh, so you actually have, not, those are not virtual devices. Those are actual real devices sitting in a data center somewhere for you to query, or
they're all virtual,
oh, they're all
all virtual.
virtual. Got it. Okay. So you actually have a lab out there that's so I guess what I'm trying to get at is, once you go through the course, will you be able to duplicate that lab? Like, if it's viral CML, do you get the config file for those labs, or do you, like, what do you get afterwards if you want to continue to practice those? Do I have to continue to subscribe to Packet Coders, or is there something I could launch locally?
Um, yeah, I mean, if you wanted to kind of, you can use your skills on your own lab. You,
Right.
you can you can use the update the inventory and the parameters that we've got within the code to your own
Sure.
devices. So
Sure.
it's very, if you've got a production, or yeah, if you've got a production network and you want to kind of use some of the scripts, or some of the some of the code out of the courses to do different things, then you can do. You just need to change those parameters within those in those inventory files, or those device attributes.
Got
So
it. Got it. Okay, cool. So, what you're saying is, you transfer the knowledge, and with minimal amount of tweaks, you can actually apply those into your production or your own lab, because you just have to change, like, I don't know, management IP and username, password. Then voila, you can actually use the same content in your production network.
yeah, I mean, obviously, there's going to be the devil's in the detail, right? So
Sure.
obviously,
Right.
there's things you might want to change. Your company might not be happy with you using, your general TACAX username and password within
Sure.
an env file, for example. But yeah, if you do want to do it on your own environment, be it your own lab environment or whatever, then you've got that opportunity. But what I would say is, if you are doing any of these scripts, it's always worth, and you probably have this within your workplace, test it, do it against a test environment. You don't want to be going straight to production.
Yeah, for sure.
with any kind of script. So I just want to put that out there. So
Oh, for sure.
it's always good to do. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. So, Rick and I both, we'll put the warning out there, for the record, don't test in production,
Always,
Facebook is
yeah.
Facebook, like move fast and break things. That's Facebook. For the rest of us, we want to test it out in test environment, and before we move into production as carefully as possible.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Cool. And as I mentioned, what I'm impressed the most about Packt Coders, whether, I also want to mention it is a paid site, but there's a lot of free stuff out there that are still useful and could serve as a guide for you to kind of see what the tone and the nature and the style of teaching on these resources. So there are free blog posts, these free guides out there for you to look at Packt Coders. And one of the things that I noticed was the variety of technologies that you've covered on the site. So I want to just kind of do a roundtable of technology, and you could kind of give us your thoughts, because obviously you've created guides and created courses on those, so you probably know more about this than us. So I wanted to do just kind of a roundtable of technologies that you could tell us, like a rapid fire kind of a question. So are you up for it?
Yeah, that's cool. What, in terms of what thoughts on tool, but also what the tool is, or just yeah.
Anything. So okay. I think obviously whatever comes to your mind, and then maybe just like a brief description of your feeling about it, if that works. So obviously we don't have 5 hours, but we do have 30 minutes. So let's do that. Let's try to squeeze out of this within 30 minutes, right? So let's start with NetMiko, Kirk's tool. So obviously most of us in network automation have used NetMiko. It's a great abstraction. So what do you think about that? NetMiko.
Yeah, it's a really good tool. Obviously it's tied to a single transport type, which is Paramiko. I think, yeah, NetMiko is great, connecting to devices, running a command, getting the output back. It supports the different parsers, Genie, TextFSM, and TTP. It's all good. I would say the thing with NetMiko that makes it quite nice is that it does support a lot of different vendor types. Right. So they're in different stages of support. But the last time I checked, there was like 105 different types.
Oh, so, no kidding! Wow.
If you're like, well, I don't want to spend dev cycles, then that's one of the, I would say one of the good points about it. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Good job, Kirk. So the second technology, PyATS. I mean, there's a lot of buzz about it. Is it open source? Is it not open source? Is it is it Cisco owned? Is it not? Like, what do you think about PyATS? So tell us what it is first, and then what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so PyATS, it's a testing framework. Sure. And that testing framework consists of various different things. So it's like a framework for writing your tests, parsing tools, actual parsers. So everything you really need to be able to. It also comes with all the different drivers for connecting out to your devices. So everything you need to be able to write a test, parse some config from a device, and to say whether it's running correctly or not. So I mean, yeah, part of the PyATS core. So it's a framework. So there's different layers to it. You have like the Genie layer for the parsers. You've got the core bit.
Right.
Part of the core I don't think is open source, but the parsing and the main parsers and everything are open source. So you can submit your own parsers if you like. PyATS is good. And you can get a whole load of wins out of it. There's things in PyATS quite nice as well. Like if you look at Blitz and mocking devices, there's you can get a lot from it because it generates the reports. It does everything for you, so you can get some good quality wins. But the devil's in the detail, right? There's things that it doesn't support, so you can't always you can't connect to, say, Arista devices.
Right.
That
That'll be the
there's
day.
different. Yeah, exactly. So if I was to say what do you want to use PyATS for? If you want to get some quick wins, go for it. Use it. It's a great tool. Loads of people getting some great wins out of it. But for me, the one thing I like from the PyATS framework is a tool called DQ, which allows you to like easily parse like nested dictionaries.
Yeah.
So I would say you DQ, and also you can use the parsers from the PyATS framework in different tools like NetMiko and Scraply. So for me, it's if you're pure Cisco house, you'll get a lot of benefits because there's a lot of things that are purely Cisco. But yeah, so it's certainly one to try out. But there's other tools out there, like Nonir and Python and stuff. But you can get some quick wins.
Yeah, so like I think that's one of the confusing part about PyATS is as network engineers, we're not as familiar with some of the testing concepts out there, like unit tests or PyTest, not to be confused with PyATS, right? PyTest testing concepts. And PyATS is fundamentally originated from a testing framework. So therefore, there's test reports by default. Like for test engineers, they need that test report at the end of the day to show parallelism. You got to execute your same test on a bunch of hundreds of testing devices potentially. Regressions on testing features on the features that you've already passed the test, but you still need to run against the testing units as long as you support them. And also outputs, right? Like you got to save those outputs. So if the test fails, you come back and the test fails, you need to be able to go back and troubleshoot on which parts it failed so you could give back to the developer. So essentially, I think that's kind of when I first learned about PyATS, those were the things hurdles I had to get over in my mind to say this is originally a testing framework and therefore A, B, C, and D. And that makes a lot more sense. But when you expand that framework out, like you said, the parsers, the DQs, those are applicable to a lot more fields and applications and a lot more applicable scenarios that you could use those for. So leverage those, but keep in mind this originated in the Cisco house, and therefore the multi-vendor support might not be as well as wide as some of the other tools that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Nonir, and I'm sorry I didn't include this in our original list, but we should throw that in definitely. Napalm and Nonir both. What are your thoughts and on those tools?
So Nonir, huge fan of that. Yeah, I mean, it's a pure kind of network automation framework, if you like. It's slightly synonymous to Ansible, but purely Python, and it's built in a really nice way. I wouldn't say I've not done huge amounts with it, but when I do use it, it's great. It's got a whole ton of plugins.
Yes,
and it's based on multi-threading.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, it supports, you can plug into it, your Napalm, your Scraply, and the different underlying tools to kind of connect out and do things on the devices. And it also provides some other things as well. So there's I don't know if they class it as a plugin or a feature, but there's something called the Napalm. I think it's the Napalm compliance. It's like kind of Napalm validators, and that provides a really nice way to be able to do some testing against the output of the devices, just using like kind of YAML based kind of manifests, if you like, to say what you're expecting. So that's a really nice feature to it as well.
Yeah, that's nicely put. So I would say I'll go kind of one step further and say it's kind of a buffet of networking tools, right? So it's a collaboration between multiple open source creators, and so it's all a lot of it is plugin based. So you have this Nornir on top, and underneath you could have different drivers. So you could actually, in order to talk to the device, you can actually use Netmiko, or you could use Scrapply, or you could use Napalm. And so you have this very generalized tool where it's expandable. So as you mentioned, then you could use other features. So yeah, it's great. So what about Batfish? So Batfish, I have a feeling that most people, or not most people, sorry, but many people are not familiar with Batfish. So in a summary, can you tell us what it is and your feelings about it?
Yeah, so Batfish is a tool that allows you to validate changes and to see the effect of those changes before you actually put them into the network. So the way it does this is it's a network modeling tool. So give it a whole load of configs, it models your network, and then you can ask that modeled network a whole bunch of different things and say, oh, and then make the decision, is it okay to now put these changes into my network? But the key thing is with Batfish is the fact that it's modeled, is you can do some really, really interesting things to your modeled network and ask some really crazy questions, which you just can't do with just traditional methods like sending pings or doing an nmap scan or anything like that. So
can you give us an example of that? Like, what are some of the interesting examples you could think of?
Yeah, so some of the things you can do is you can say, oh, I want to do an impact analysis. So you've got your modeled network and you can then pull out a link or take down a node, and then you can say, well, what does the flow look like? Compare the flow before you've done that and then after. Is that are there any differences in the flow? So you can do like offline impact analysis to make sure that there's different things in your network that's not causing an issue. It completely rebuilds. The thing to mention as well is it also completely rebuilds the control plane. So it rebuilds all of the OSPF and BGP ribs. So as you are taking down these links and removing these nodes, that's all computed within that model. And then,
Got it.
So, and another thing that you can do as well, which is, I think, amazing, is, you can just say, tell me, without going too far into the weeds, but you can basically say, well, tell me the effect on these flows, but you can do it in a single question. So it does that analysis on all ports and all protocols. So if you wanted to say, well, tell me in my network what's not permitted, then it would then calculate all flows from all points on all protocols and all IP addresses all at the same time. So you could then just pick out exactly what's happening. Whereas before you'd have to do like an nmap scan and iterate over different port ranges. So hopefully that gives a nice summary without going too far into the weeds.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good summary. And they set out to solve a difficult problem, right? Because they set out to solve the problem where you're doing everything offline, and you have to understand every single platform that they support, how they treat flows, how they treat ACLs and all of that, and then you model your whole network after it. So that is so I think those are the big things. Is you're doing things offline, and you're doing things you're modeling your network as if it was running in a stateful manner. So so yeah, I think Batfish is something we should talk about later on the show. So thanks for giving me the idea.
Yeah, that's cool. What I would say, just to quickly frame that for folks, just a final thing is that because it's offline, it lends itself perfectly for CI. So you can put it into your CI pipelines, and then you can do all your pre-tests. So before you put it into, that's where it sits, pre-tests within a CI pipeline before your changes go into the network. And because you can do those flow tests, and because you can also check the configuration, then you can do the unit tests and the integration tests within that pre-stage of your CI pipeline.
That's a great point. That's exactly what they're marketed themselves after. It's the pre-validation testing, and of course they do a lot more, but the validation testing is one of the biggest thing. What about Scrapply? So we had Carl on the show before, but I like to hear your thoughts about Scrapply.
Yeah, so Scrapply is cool. So Netmiko supports a lot of devices.
Sure.
And it supports, yes, a lot of devices that you can do the parsing and everything like that. But it's pinned to like kind of just using an underlying transport paramiko. So
Yeah.
with Scrapply, you can custom. It's really flexible. You can customize what the underlying transport mechanism is.
Yeah.
So that helps if you want to kind of use things more like with SSH2, and it's faster. It also then gives you more benefits with using SSH config files. But
Sure.
also then it comes with a number of different extensions. So the thing is with Scrapply, comes with a config, a CFG extension for pushing and validating diffs as you load in and committing different configs, a netconf
Yeah.
extension. So yeah, it comes with these different extensions, which kind of makes it a bit more of a kind of Swiss Army knife. But
Sure.
the thing that it doesn't do is it has very strong support for the main vendor type. So any supports, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's like 5, like the Arista, the Juniper, the Nexus. So exactly the same types as what Napalm supports.
Right.
So that's where the two sit, right? So if you've got like an ASA and you haven't got the dev cycles, you might want to have a look at NetMiko. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're pure Arista house and you're going speed, then look at Scrapply. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically what Carl feels like supporting and what his day job requires him to write about. And something I'll add also, just because just because I talked to Carl a couple of times in the last few weeks. So Carl, they take advantage of the async IO. That's why it's fast in the Python 3 async IO. So it's parallelism in a single thread, mind you. So parallelism, and he takes advantage of the Python newer features like typing. So as what Rick was saying, it's fast. It's supports not as many vendors, but the ones that they support has a lot of performance gain compared to NetMiko, just because of the underlying transport. So
yeah,
what about Suzik? This is something that I'm very excited about. It's so I'll have Dinesh on later in the future. I'm looking forward to talk to him, but we should hear your thoughts as well. I'm surprised at how much you cover Suzik. So, what are your thoughts and what is it?
yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about Suzy Q. It's a great tool, and to be honest, so what it does is an observability tool.
Okay.
It basically polls your network for information. So it polls the network for data, stores it in a database. It normalizes it within that database, and so you can query that data within the database using an API, a CLI. There's a GUI as well, Python module, but you can query it within like a vendor agnostic way, if you like, and the data you get back is vendor agnostic. So off the cuff, if you want to have a look at how many routes, etc., all the addresses, then you can do using a common set of questions. So there's a couple of things that make so SuzyQ sits within the post validation step of
Yeah.
of things. So the thing that makes SuzyQ really, really nice is really two things, right? One, you got a feature called either summarize or summarization, can't recall, but what it does is it does the calculations on different values that it's got within the database. So you don't have to then go and say how many interfaces are down, how many prefixes I've got. You can literally just query the summarize of a different table. So all the data is kind of cataloged as different kind of service tables, if you like. So you've got one for routes, one for addresses, one for OSPF, one for BGP.
Right.
So that's a really cool thing, right? So that saves you dev cycles because you don't have to go in and you don't have to kind of iterate over things to get a value. That's cool. The other thing that for me, I probably the killer feature is that you can do time-based analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So you can now say, what did my network look like 2 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago? And with that's really nice on its own. It's great in the CLI as well, because you might not always want to just automate your validation, you might just want to kind of give it to your ops teams to have a platform to be able to kind of validate and just check and troubleshoot things. So that's really nice. So you can just go in and say, well, what do the routes look like 5 minutes ago? But you can also say, well, what changes happened between these times? And then you can see what changed. So it's really nice for troubleshooting. Now, the key thing here is now, as soon as you start to kind of combine these features, you can now say, well, what was the summarize of this table 5 minutes ago? And then so you can see all the number of prefixes.
Right.
And so, yeah, it starts to kind of, double up in terms of how great it is when you start using some of these features together. And so, yeah, that's kind of a high level summary of it. It's a super cool tool and a super cool community as well. Like if you get a chance and you want to get involved, then yeah, I'd definitely go out to the Slack community. There's a SuzyQ Slack community, and there's some new office hours that have just been spun up. So it's a great time to get involved, and so it's a really good tool.
Nice. And I just want to mention that the reason I brought these up is because Rick actually has guides, blog, courses on all of these technologies. So Scrapply, SuzyQ, PyATS, Batfish, and so on, and of course general Python courses. So check it out. And I'll also include there's a very interesting blog post on SuzyQ's network config time machine, and I'll put the link in the show notes as well. It's just a quick, like, I don't even know if it's like a 2-minute read, but it actually showcases at a high level what it's about. And yeah, if you just want to, kind of see an example of that.
Yeah.
So
thanks, Eric.
Yeah, for sure. It's great. So I mean, we talked about all these technologies, and and I mean, I'm trying to catch my breath for speaking so many technologies. But so, what are the challenges in network automation today? I mean, is it lack of resources, too many resources, motivation, technical standardization? What are your thoughts on that? So, what are the big challenges in network automation today?
I mean, one of the things is there's a lot of tools and there's a lot of things for people to learn. So, I feel like, people probably are stretched thin. Do they learn Kubernetes? Do they deep dive into, Docker or YAML or, there's so many things, and there's a lot of things changing as well.
Right.
But for me, I honestly, the thing that I really feel like that is missing is a good, strong virtual kind of a network virtualization platform. And by that, I say, I've seen that, we've got the different container projects coming out.
Sure.
To step back. So at the moment, we've got Eve and we've got GNS 3.
Right.
Which is great. But how do you want, like, can we put them into a CI pipeline? Is there any good Python? Is there any good Python libraries for them? It's a little bit, things are moving with the container side of things in terms of this. But for me, I feel like there's a missing gap. And I really, unfortunately, I say this and I haven't got the answers because I haven't got the time to build one. But that's, for me, that's the problem. I want to be able to say, I want to be able to spin up a virtualized environment. So, and have an open source project to allow me to do that. There are different ways of doing it, but that's the thing I think is really missing at the moment.
So do you think the new container lab by the folks at SR Linux would help?
I think it certainly helps to a degree. Like if you can get your NOS in a container-based platform,
sure,
then I think that really helps. There's projects out there like VRNet Lab, which is good, but personally, I found that as I've tried to get different images and things into them, there's been, because you're adding more layers and there's wiring in there, those wires needed to be rejigged, which is more time, and so yeah. So I mean, VRNet Lab is okay, and Container Lab, I think Container Lab is great. I hope as well that there's more of the vendors bring out container based NOSes for testing, because I think, to be honest, that's where things need to go. And there's movements certainly within the ecosystem that shows that is happening. around the container
Yeah.
side of things. So some of the work that Roman is doing is certainly kind of complementing that thought. You know, you've got the container lab at the moment, and there are other projects that are now kind of starting to leverage in and come in with Kubernetes. Now, that is hopefully where it's going, right? We can create a CEO, we can create a lab within our CEO, spin it up and down using, you know, Kubernetes manifests, and then we can have, you know, the full suite of testing. You know, you've got the pre-tests, we've got the post-tests. We can also test it within a VM, because you want to test things as much as possible, right, before something goes out to the network. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good point, and I think that's where things are converging, and it kind of bled over from the application development world, where containers and all of that needs to be in the networking world as well. In fact, I think if you use the hosted version of Jenkins, which is, you know, CI/CD pipeline tool, that the testing has to be in Dockers, right? Like if you're doing a you know, on-prem Jenkins, then obviously the test bed could be anything you choose. But if you do a hosted version of Jenkins, that they require you to run them in Docker. So definitely right direction. But as you said, we need more projects and just more smart folks diving into this area and make things, I don't know, improve things. So, you know, so I want to kind of change our direction toward just from, you know, so we talked about how you got to network automation. We talked about the current offerings of, you know, Packet Coders, your philosophies, your feelings about different technologies. So how, if we look forward, how do people get started in network automation?
Yeah, I would say the main thing is kind of just getting something to test against. So
Okay.
get yourself a GNS3, get yourself an Eve, just Eve NG, just get yourself something where you can just spin up some devices, and that it doesn't matter if you kill them or you do whatever to them, through learning that, you know, you're okay. So I'd say, yeah, spin up a lab using that, and then just learn some basic Python, and then start running some scripts against it. Give yourself a project. So, you know, a really good one is like backing up. So take backups of all your devices within the lab. And then as you kind of step through and you give yourself more projects, you'll get more questions that you need to answer. So you'll be like, okay, well, I want to now give yourself the project of seeing if there's any interface errors within the lab. Which, if you're using VMs, that happens a lot from my experience. so that's another good one. And then you'll get to the point and you're like, well, actually, it's a nightmare to go through this raw text. So I've heard about parsers, and then that'll bring you into the world of parsing. So, go down that path. Now, that is kind of like the Python path. And I would, certainly kind of recommend doing that. If, you wanted to kind of get some super quick wins, and your boss is like, hey, I want you to do some network automation, like get things done quick, then for sure, like have a look at Ansible, because you can get some quick wins with Ansible. Further on down the line, you might not like it because it might not be as flexible as you want it to be.
Right.
But it's certainly a good way to get, some quick wins if you need it. But if you're learning, then I would go down the, learning the Python first, because getting that core understanding and learning is really going to do you well. So
right. Yeah, those are good points about quick wins, about different technologies to get into. But definitely your point about build yourself a lab so you could break it, and then do some things that are wins but doesn't are low risk, like read only, interface errors, like you said, and or we're talking about Packet Coders, right? Or we could just jump onto Packet Coders and save yourself a bunch of time, and shortcut all of these kind of busy work, and just get right to the fun stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
But the other thing I would say is that you showed that blog post before. Like, there is a newsletter that we provide, and one of the things I've tried to do in the newsletter, like you were saying, it's a short post. The blogs are very short, and they're designed that way so you don't just end up like thinking, I'll read that later. Like you can literally get the meat out of it straight away. So that's the key thing.
Nice.
So because I've my bookmarks in Twitter are terrible. Like, you know, I just I'll read that later. But
Right.
yeah, so you can sign up on the site, and every week send out, you know, network automation nuggets that you can hopefully find useful. And then every month, especially if it's going to be going out in the next couple of days, I aggregate everything that's happened in the month, and then there's a monthly newsletter around all everything that's been happening in network automation. So that's also cool.
Oh wow, that's super nice. Yeah, I'll definitely point people to that. But it's just basically if you go to packetcoders.io, it's right on the front page, and if you're on the YouTube video, then you'll see right away. So you just sign up, subscribe, and Rick will do all the heavy lifting for you on um what do we talk about, take things out, so you strip down into just the meat and potato, so you could,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
if you're on your smartphone, you could get something out of it, you could read it right away. And then every month he will aggregate and summarize what's happening in network automation world and deliver right to your inbox. So that's nice. I've signed up, so I look forward to those newsletters and nuggets.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's cool. Yep.
Nice. So, you started as packet coder. Like you said, you start ramping it up, right? So it's something else before, and then you start ramping up, maybe May, March this year. And where do you see packet coders in 5 years, in 2 years, 2 to 5 years?
Yeah. So I mean, I just continuing to help folks really.
Yep.
And so we're the platform at the moment is going through more of a looking to teach people the testing side of things.
Sure.
So really kind of building out that journey for folks. So, you know, 2 to 5 years, certainly hope that we've got, we will have more around kind of configuration management, integrations, more kind of production-based best practices. So just all about kind of building out that user journey really. So taking people from zero all the way through to building out a full-fledged end-to-end network automation platform.
Nice. So I mean, we could probably, both of us are very passionate about network automation. We could probably talk, hours, but we're coming up on an hour. We're a little bit over, but I love our conversation. But before we say goodbye, if people want to get involved, you already mentioned the membership and the newsletter. So I guess I'll jump right to, any call to action. Any call to action for people who want to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, just jump on, get the newsletter, and as the newsletters come out, if you've got any questions or anything that, you might even have a use case that you're looking to automate and you want to kind of get some thoughts on it, feel free to reply via email. I'll get that, and it'd be great to hear from folks about what people are looking to do in terms of network automation and the use cases and what they want to automate against. So just reach out. And you can also come onto the Twitter handle we've got there, the Packet Coders, and kind of interact with us on Twitter if that's a better platform for folks. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate you being on the show, Rick. I feel like I've learned a lot of stuff today. Also it was interesting to hear about your journey and your thoughts on different technologies. I feel like this is a jam-packed informational session. So I want to thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's been great. And like you said, I mean, we could probably sit here and talk about automation for hours, right? There's so much stuff to cover. So no, it's been a blast. I really appreciate you getting us on the show.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you for listening to the Network Automation Nerds podcast today. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other podcast platforms. Until next time, bye-bye.